This is Gemara Horayos Daf. Hey, and all the learning for this month. The month of Elul, as we march towards the Yom Rayim, has been sponsored by a close friend of the Daf as an incredible schos aliyas neshama. Aster Reyzel Baser Meir B'siyata D'Shemaya. The koyach hatayra Talmud Torah Kenegikulam should bring Aster Reyzel Baser Meir to a higher place in Gan Eden Shel Maila. We're holding on, Dalim and Beis. We're on the second wide line as we continue discussing different cases and applications of the Par Halam Davar Shal Tzibor, this unique carbon that is brought by Bezdin when they paskin incorrectly and Roiv Klal Yisrael act based on their psak. So it says the Mishnah, Hayroi Bezdin Shaygin. In a case in which Bezdin, which I guess this would be the classical case, Bezdin paskins incorrectly, v'asa kol hakal shaygigin, and then kol hakal, which of course means roiv hakal, doesn't have era b'shaygig. The lacha is bevi'in par. But mezidin, if Bezdin knew, and they either way paskind, meaning they purposely messed up, v'asa shaygim, and the people followed them because they thought it was correct, mevi'in, then they have to bring but a different carbon, a kisva usiira. Each person that did the avera has to bring a classical chatos. Shoygin v'asu mezidin. If Bezdin paskin incorrectly by mistake, and the person knew about it and he still followed Bezdin b'mezid, hareilu p'turin, then there is no carbon at all because there's no carbon by a mezid. Says the Gemara case. Shaygin v'asa mezidim. In the final case, if the Bezdin did a bit shaygin and the people acted a bit mezid, what did the Mishnah say? It said, Harelu peturin. Asks the Gemara, shaygin mezid chayiv. But in the case of a shaygin that is similar to a mezid, one is yes chayiv. Echidami. And what is such a case? Shayru Bezdin shechila moter v'nischal v'shuman. Bezdin paskins chaylev, which again is usually aser. Bezdin paskins it's mutter, and the person's chaylev and shuman got mixed up. V'achlo, and he ate it. Says the Gemara, this is a case that the avera is done b'shoygig, and not necessarily because they thought or anything of Bezdin's halacha. The foods got swapped with each other, and yet in this case, what do we see? There is a carbon brought. So why is this any different than the case in the Mishnah when the people acted b'shoygig, when the people acted b'mezid based on the psak b'shoygig of Bezdin? Lema tifshid ha dabai Rabbi Rachama. Maybe we can answer up the shayla of what Rami Bar Chama says. The Gemara, Rabbi Rachama asks, what's the halacha in this case? So maybe we should bring a raya from our Mishnah. Amr lecha Rami Rosvan, Misha de Tana Reisha Mizin Vasa Shaygin, Tani Seva Shaygin Vasa Mizidin. Lav Davka is a raya from our Mishnah. Because the first part of the Mishnah spoke about a Shaygig, a Mezid, of Bezdin. And the people did a bit Shaygig, except for the Seva spoke about a Shaygig that's done by Mezid. But Lav Davka, can we bring a raya from this case? Continues the last Mishnah on the bottom of the Amid, Hayrei Bezdin Vasu Kol HaKal Ruben Al Piyim. Again, Bezdin gives a psak halacha, and Klal Yisrael follows Bezdin. What's the halacha? Mevi'in par, you have to bring the par al davar shel tzibur. But says the Mishnah, Mevi'in par means, explains the Mefarshim, Bezdin brings this carbon. But if Bezdin permits avodah zara, Mevi'in par, v'sayer, the Bezdin has to bring both a par and the special sayur that's brought for being over avodah zara. Divri Rabbi Meir. Rav Yehuda Eimer Yud Beis Shvatim. Says Rav Yehuda, 12 Shvatim, Mevin Yud Beis Parim. Each shevet brings their own par al davar shel tzibur. But as Chacham Mevin Yud Beis Parim, Yud Beis Sirim. But if the avera was avodah zara, then each shevet has to bring not just the carbon, the parallel davar, but also the special carbon of avodah zara. And we turn over to Amid Aleph. It continues the Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon Aimer teaches Rabbi Shimon, no, Yud Gimel Parim. that they have to bring 13 karbanos. What's 13? The Yud Beis Shvatim plus an additional one of the Bezdin. But it's Chavim Shloshasar Parim, Yugam Seirim. Par V'Sar L'Chol Shevet V'Shevet for the Vodizara. Par V'Sar LeBezdin, and that's you get 13. Hayre Bezdin Vasu Zayin Shvatim. Continues the Mishnah. What if it wasn't called Klal Yisrael? It was Ra'iv. Bezdin set up Psak Halacha and 7 Shvatim. Oy Ruben Al PM Aviyam Par. They're bringing up Par Elam Davar, but it's Chavim Aviyam Par. V'Sayer Divi Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda Eimer no. Zayin Shvatim, the 7 Shvatim Shechatu, they Mevin Zayin Parim. V'Shar Shvatim Shechatu, they're just going to bring Mevin Al Yedeyam. Mevin Al Yedeyam Par. They're going to also bring, Shiv Shvatim Shechatu Mevin Shiva Parim, one for each Shevet. And all the other Karbanos who did not, all the other Shvatim, who did not do the Aveira, bring a par for the other 7. Sha'af elu, because even these shaloichatu, mevin al yedei chaitin, they have to bring a carbon. So the remaining shvatim are going to bring a carbon for the 7 that were over the aveira. Rav Shimon Aimer teaches Rav Shimon ches parim, but it's ches parim v'ches seirim. How do we get ches? Par v'sar l'chol shevet v'shevet, par v'sar lebezdin. So that's how we're going to get the 7 for each shevet, plus the 8th one for bezdin. So according to Rav Shimon, only the shvatim that did the aver bring the carbon, but not the other shvatim. Hayre bezdin shel echan min hashvatim v'asu oisai hashevet. If the Bezdin, each Shevet had the own Matei Dinim, so if one Bezdin of that Shevet made an incorrect Psak Halacha, Vasu Osa Shevet Apim, that Shevet did the Aveira. Oisa Shevet Uchai, if that Shevet brings the Paralam Davar, that the Paralam Davar, it's going to be viewed within that Shevet as a Roiv. V'shar Kol HaShvatim, P'turin Devi Rabbi Yehuda, Chamayrim, no. Ein chayavim ela al Horayos bezdin hagadol bilvad. Say the chachamim, no, there's no param davar at all, because the carbon is only if the bezdin hagadol, not each and every smaller shevet. Paskin shenamar v'kol adas Yisrael yishku v'lo yadas ois shevet. It's the adas Yisrael honing in on the psak of the bezdin hagadol, not the psak of each and every bezdin. We continue on Hamid Aleph as we dive into the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan. Yadu Shehayroi V'tau Ma Shehayroi. The Bezdin knew they made a mistake, they knew they paskind, but V'tau Ma Sheharu. They weren't sure as to what they said. They weren't sure which of 2 things that they said, which one of them was in error. Says the pasuk v'noida chatos, which means but not when they know about the aveira. So from here we see that there's going to be no paralam davar shel tzibur. You only bring the paralam davar shel tzibur if you know exactly the mistake that was made. But if not, there's no paralam davar shel tzibur. Asher chatu. Continues the pasuk. Chatu shnei shvat. Asher chatu shnei shvatim. From here we learn out of 2 shvatim made a mistake. Meviyim shnei parim. Chatu shleisha. Meviyim shleisha. Oyeina yella. Says the Gemara, but maybe this is not true. Oyeina, or maybe Omer. You know what the pasuk is teaching us? Al chatu shnei chidim meviyim shnei parim. Chatu gimel meviyim gimel. And it doesn't go by each shevet. Hamal Omer hakal. Hakal chayv v'chol kal. Kal chayv, each and every kehal, each and every shevet is going to have their own chiyuv. Ketzad, how is this shayeh? Chatu shnei shvatim, maybe in shnei parim, chatu zayin, maybe in zayin. V'shar shvatim, shaloi chatu. And the other shvatim that did not make a mistake, maybe in al yedeyam par, they have to bring a par for those that did make the mistake. Shafilu par shafilu elu shaloi chatu. Because even the other shvatim that didn't do the avera, mavin ayidei hachaytim, bring for those who did the avera. Lekach nemar kal lechayv akol kal divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's how Rabbi Yehuda darshans up the din that he taught in the Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon Omer zayin shvatim shechatim avin zayin parim ubezdin, not the other shvatim, but rather argues Rav Shimon, and he says that ubezdin mevin al yedeyem parsh never lamata kal. Where does Rav Shimon learn this from? It says kahal v'never lamala kahal makal amr lamala bezdin im hakal avkal amr lamata bezdin im hakal. Sheet number 2 in the Mishnah. So we have Rav Yehuda, we have Rav Shimon. Now we have Rabbi Meir. Meir, Aimer, lines from the wide lines. First one line is Aimer. Sheva Shvatim Shechatu. Bezdin Nevi'im Al Yedei Empire. The Bezdin brings for the Shvatim that did the Aveira vein, but the Shvatim themselves are Pturim. Nemar Kal, where do we learn this from? Lamata v'Nemar Kal Lamala. Ma Kal Amur Lamala Bezdin v'Loi Tzibur. Avkal Amur Lamata Bezdin v'Loi Tzibur. So therefore, it's brought by the Bezdin. So 3 different shitas: Rav Yehuda, Rav Meir, and Rav Shimon. Rav Shimon Elazar Aimer Mishmai says Rav Shimon in the name of Shimon Elazar says in his name, in the name of Rav Meir, Chatu Shisha Shvatim, 2 lines on the wide lines, Ehim Ruba Shalkal, Oizayir, or 7 Shvatim, Avli She'ena Ruben Shalkal. It's a majority of Shvatim, even though it's not the majority necessarily in numbers. The halacha is Mevi'in Par. They bring a par. So a 3-way machlokes, exactly what are the parameters of the Paralam Davar Shal Tzibor? Who is the one that's going to bring it? Amar Mar in the first wide line says the Gemara. Let's dive a little bit deeper into the aforementioned brisa. The chatos became known, but now when they know who did the avera, from this we learn out that the Param Davar Shal Tzibor is only brought when we know what avera was the mistake that Bezdin made. Man Tana, who is the Tana that says such a Rabbi Damaravi, Timarava, Deloik, Rabbi Eliezer? It's not like Rabbi Eliezer. Titanan, we learned in a Mishnah, or the Tanya, Amar Rabbi Eliezer, Manev Shachim, Mechilav Achal Chayiv, Noiser Achal Chayiv. Rabbi Eliezer says, what's the difference? What the Avera is, whether it's Chilav, whether it's Noiser. There was a Psaki correctly, and there was an Avera that was done. Therefore, there will be a Paralam Davar Shal Tzibor. So Rabbi Eliezer argues on this basic tenet. Rabbi Eliezer does not say you need to know what Avera it's going to be. Rav Ashi Amar Afilu Tamer Rabbi Eliezer. No, it could be Rabbi Eliezer. Shiny Acham. The case over here is different. The Paralam Davar Shal Tzibor Shechatu Aleha. And from there we learn out that you have to know about the Avera. Says the Gemara, Hasam Nami over there also by Rabbi Eliezer was darshaning up a regular chatas, like Sevash Chata Ba. So seemingly you do have to know the Avera. And yet Rabbi Eliezer said it's enough to know you didn't Avera. Who cares what the Avera was? Explains the Gemara, Homi Baile Prat Lemis Asek. Comes to include, and someone is misasek, he thinks he doesn't know exactly what he's doing, that's when there will be no carbon. Says the Gemara. Okay, so we have 3 shitas from Rav Yehuda and Rav Shimon. So let's go one at a time. 4th wide line. My time of the Rav Yehuda. What's the reason of Rav Yehuda? Ksav Arba Kal Ksiva. Rav Yehuda learns out. The Torah says the word kal 4 times. Kal, akahal. Chad, 1 time the chayv al kol kalu klal. That the paral modavar for each kal, for each shevev. Chad, at 1 time. Lohira, toluya bebezdin, umaisa toluya bekal. To teach us that the mistake depends on the bezdin. Well, the action is done by the people. And the 3rd one is ligreira, literally dragging. That's Rav Yehuda's chiddush that the other shvatim that didn't do the averos have to bring a carbon. The 4th halacha of Rav Yehuda is that what? If the shevet's own bezdin paskin, they as well bring the carbon. The Rav Shimon, he says no, there's 3 times. Akal, akal, akal. me'ene akal. So Rav Shimon learns out from the hey of the pasuk of me'ene hakal or chedikrahu. That's just the way the Torah talks. So it says Rav Shimon, you don't have a fourth drasha. You only have three drashas. As people say, like the eyes of so and so. So it says me'ene hakal, but it's not a drasha that could be made. So Rav Shimon only has three drashas. So Rav Shimon doesn't have that the other shvatim bring. It's going to be just bezdin. Rebbe Meir, the third shita, kalakal loy darish. Rebbe Meir says, no, it's not four, it's not three, it's only two. Because kalakali doesn't darish. And elkach trey kali, it's only two ksivi. Mi bayalei lenemar mlate kal v'nemar lemalakal. Malal bezdin lo tzibur afkan. Bezdin veloy tzibur. And those are the three shitas, Rebbe Meir, Shimon, and Rebbe Yehuda. And we ended off the brayso with Rav Shimon Elazar Mishmai. Rav Shimon Elazar saying over the name of Rabbi Meir. So Shimon Elazar my time. The pasuk says through the Eine, the eyes of the Eda. Alma, what do we see? Miuta. That even if it's a minority of Klal Yisrael, they're still going to bring a carbon. Me'ene uksiv, and the pasuk says kil cholam bishgaga. The memra deruba in miuta. Once it's going to be a rife, that's when you're going to bring this parallel davar. Okay, he said also vavehin rubish alkal zainav vishain rubang chalkal. This year Shimon Elazar learns up that chayavim there will be this carbon. And we turn over to Hayamid Beis, and the Gemara continues. The Gemara says, "Rav Shimon v'Rabbi Meir v'Hayra Tzliya bebezdin u'Maisa Tali bekal minalu." So Rav Shimon and Rav Meir didn't have all four jashais. And therefore, ask the Gemara, how do they know the very basic of the Param Davar Shal Tzibor, that it's a psak of Bezdin, but it's a Maisa of the people? Amar Abaye, Damar Cross says the pasuk, Vaya me'inei ha'ida, nesasa lishgaga. So the pasuk says, Vaya me'inei ha'ida, and it ends off, Nesasa was done lishgaga. That shows us that one's psak caused something else. That's where they learn out that it's the bezdin done by the people. Rav Amar Melekola Bishkaga. That's what they learned it out for. Usricha. So why do we need two different psukim? I would have thought, even if it's a minority of the people, you need to have all, meaning rife. I would have thought lekolam is bezdin and the people. But these psukim are talking about avodah zarah. How do we not apply it by regular averos? Alfinan me'ene le'ene gzeir shava, which teaches us not just avodah zarah but any avera. And we continue by quoting the last part of the Mishnah. We're about 12 lines down, the two dots. Hayra bezdin shel echad. So the Mishnah continued that what if it was a local bezdin? What if it was a bezdin of a certain shevet? Says the Gemara, Ibayaluhu. Shevet echad Rav Yehuda bayras bezdin agadol. According to Rav Yehuda, if one shevet didn't have era based on a psak of the bezdin agadol, mi maisi shar shvatim oiloi. According to Rav Yehuda, would a avera by one shevet trigger that all the shvatim would have to bring this carbon? So what's the shaila? The Gemara explains. Do we say that when 7 shvatim did the avera, the other shvatim bring with them? Why? Shavdeika ruba, it's rive of the shvatim. Aval chad shevet, like a ruba loi, but if it's one shevet not. Maybe there's no difference. Once a full shevet is doing something wrong based on the psak of bezdin agadol, everyone will have to bring the carbon. Tashema, says the Gemara, Mahin Mivi, and Par Echad Shimon Omer, Shnei Par. So what does this brayso teach us? B'may askinon. Ilim shechatu shiva shimin tamanya boy. Why would Rav Shimon say 2 parim? It should be 8. El dechata shevet echad. It must be that only one shevet made this mistake, and that's where we have this machlokes whether 1 or 2 karbanos are going to be brought. B'may ibayraz bezdin. If it's the own local bezdin, Rav Shimon lastly, Rav Shimon holds that in this such a case is no baram davar. So alav, what must this brayso be referring to? By Raz bezdin agadol, and so we see that this still is going to be a baram davar shel sibur. Tanakama nami, but ask the Gemara, who's the Tanakama? Inim Rav Meir haruba bay el Rav Yehuda, so must be it's Rav Yehuda. So says the Gemara. So what do we see? We see that even if one shevet makes a mistake, then like Shita's Rav Yehuda, there's going to be a parallel davar shel sibur. So ask the Gemara. We see from this brayso that there's only going to be 1 par according to Rav Yehuda. So what does that show us? That shows us that when this one shevet does the aveira, that's the only shevet that brings the carbon, but not with everyone else. So Amri, they responded 3 lines from the white lines. Kon shechatu shisha shvatim. You know what the case is? Vein Ruben shel kahal. Rav Shimon Elazar he did. Tani Rav Shimon Elazar Aimer on the first white line. Mishmai chatu shisha vein Ruben shel kahal. Shavav b'shein Ruben shel kahal maviyim par. There's going to be 1 par because it's the majority of Klal Yisrael, a majority roiv of the Yidden, and that's where the brayso's 2 shitas will be, whether it's 1 or whether it's going to be 2. So we don't have a teretz yet. What happens if 1 shevet acts on the base then agadol? So Tashma the Gemara tries again. Rav Yehuda Omer on the second white line. Shevet she'asa b'raz bezdin. The shevet acted based on its own bezdin. Oisa shevet chayiv shakol shvatim turim. Ubayraz bezdin agadol. Fil shar shvatim chayavim. Shema mina. So we have a clear raya. Amar Rav Ashi Masis in Amidei. I'll bring you a raya from our Mishnah. They can tell you what the Mishnah say. Vasa oisa shevet al pm. Oisa shevet chayiv shakol shvatim turim. Salamli the mistim shar shvatim turim. Why did the Mishnah have to articulate the Har Shvatim Bar Potter? Hatani say Sheva Chayiv. Once you say that Shevet is Chayiv, is it not indicative that everyone else is Potter? Kima the Tano says Sheva Chayiv. Memelo Yadano. We of course know to Shar Shvatim Turim. Ella. So rather, what must the Mishnah be teaching me? Ella says the Gemara. You know the Mishnah must be teaching me. Hakamash V'lan Devaraz Beis Dinai. Who the Shar Shvatim Turim? That only in this case, where it's his best in that basket, so that Shevet brings in not all the other Shvatim, but from there we'll imply Avol Bezin Agadol, by Ras Bezin Agadol, and 1 Shevet to that Verafish Shvar Shvatim Chayavim Shema Mina, and this is indeed a raya. So one last Shaila Yibayalu asked the Gemara 8 lines into the wide lines. Shevet Echad Shazav Ras Bezdin Agadol Rav Shimon Mi Maisi. 2. They bring the parallel davar oiloif 1 shevet. Tashema made mevim bar echad Rav Shimon and Shnei parim the aforementioned brayso. So what's the case? Says the Gemara Shnei parim shmeinim parim bai ela dechatu shevet echad b'ma yilim baraz bezdin its own bezdin Rav Shimon lastly el baraz bezdin agadol v'tizbra. Says the Gemara Tanakama. Where's the Tanakama money? Who is going to be the sheet of this Tanakama, as we said a moment ago? You Rav Meir, Ruba Ba, you Rav Yehuda Shar Shvatim Nami Maisi. Elamani Shimon Elazar Hi Uchletanya. And as we learned in a brayso above, so we'll have a raya to our shayla to Shema v'cham ha'imrim lo'ilum inu chayv el raz beis dino hagadol man chachamim yilim Rav Meir Nachum al Ruba Ba. Rav Shimon Shema Mina. So we have a raya that according to Shimon, that when 1 shevet doesn't have ear based on Bezin Agadol, that shevet will indeed have to bring the parallel davar shel sibur. We'll pick it up from here. B'siyata dishmai.